very pleased to have you in the Cuppa Of Life Cafe this morning. I can't wait for this chat. I know we always do a pre-chat with our talent, and I think our pre-chat was a very honest chat between how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, and the journey that you've been on as well. So I'm really looking forward to some of the tips and thoughts that you'll share with everyone this morning. But to kick it off, Jane, you're a POM, I see.
I am.
Yeah.
Hope not too whinging.
No. Well, yeah. Not yet. Anyway, like it's an early. Have you had your morning cuppa?
I've had coffee because I live in Melbourne, and now I'm onto my tea. So yeah. So no, I'm a POM. I've been here 10 years. Came here in 2010.
During the last 10 years, though, you've been very open about suffering from burnout, and you told us in the pre that it was you reckon for 10 years you had burnout.
I did, yeah. Was
that prior to Tells? That was over in the UK when you started suffering?
No. I was really healthy, really fit and active. And actually, it happened when I arrived in Australia.
Right.
I couldn't work out what was happening. I thought it might be the jet lag. I thought it might just be the adjustment of culture. But over a period of a couple of weeks, when I arrived in Australia in 2010, my fatigue just got worse and worse to the point where I could barely get out of bed in the morning, and I would spend my weekends sleeping. I kind of just have this feeling that, version 1 of you has run out of road. You're done. I kind of think, I don't know if this is a bad metaphor or not, but I kind of think of life as a bit of a, it's like a computer game where there's many levels, and you do what you need to do on a certain level, and then you're done, and then you need to level up. And this is why I think the midlife crisis happens. You're living your younger years, you're living in a kind of ego state, and then you get to your midlife years and you realize that there's more to life than that, and there's this other voice inside of you that's coming through that wants more than what the ego wants. And so there's a natural pull towards going to another level in your midlife years. And so that's very much what happened to me. I was sick of my life. I was sick of myself. I was sick of being unhappy. I was just sick of the person I was, and it was time to throw that all out and reinvent myself. Yeah, and this is why I find the midlife crisis and these kind of 40s and 50s years so interesting, and it's why I set up my Into the Forest project, because when you're younger, your 20s and 30s, your metrics for success are usually about things out there, money, promotion, status, how other people see you, material acquisition, all of those things. And there's something that's really subtle that creeps up on you when you get into your 40s and 50s, and your definition of good life is and what success is fundamentally changes. And so the things that you value become completely different. And not to sound too kind of cliched, but you start to realize that you won't be thinking about the job you did or the achievements that you made at work or the pair of shoes you bought or the house you lived in on your deathbed. None of those things will matter to you. And you realize you have this growing realization that actually what really matters in life is, are you at peace with yourself on the inside? And this is why I find that 40s and 50s are really potent people, because it's the time when you start asking yourself very different questions about, you start to ask, who am I, first of all? So Into the Forest is this metaphor for, it's been used in psychology, Jungian psychology, I think. I'm not an expert. And also like fairy tales forever. Yes. Like the idea of the forest is a metaphor that's been used by humans forever to tell a story. And for me, it's about the times in our life when we set out to find ourselves. It's when we decide you're going to go on this epic adventure to find ourselves. And it's about, the reason why the forest is a perfect metaphor for that is because if you don't know yourself at all, or you don't like yourself, the journey to find yourself feels like wandering around in the forest. In the forest, there's no maps, there's no paths. You're on your own. It's dark, it's scary, there's monsters, right? And that's why the forest is a perfect metaphor for when you go on the kind of psychological and spiritual journey to find yourself. And the thing that's really fascinating about that process, particularly, during the midlife crisis and so on, is that the thing that really fascinates me is that it seems to be a thing for humans that you have to go all the way into the forest and feel completely and utterly lost. You have to break down completely. You have to let go of everything in order to find yourself. It feels like you have to unravel, and you have to feel lost and completely alone in order to break through to the other side and find yourself. And so for me, the Into the Forest project, it's a passion project. I'm not making any money on it. It's completely a passion project. And the thing that really interests me about these 40s and 50s decades, it's when big things happen to people, because you realize that everything in the world outside of you can leave. Everybody, everything, every cent, your house, you can lose everything. Everything will leave or die or go. And you realize the only thing you have is yourself. The only thing that's leaving you is yourself. And so for me, that's what Into the Forest, it's there for people who want to go on that journey of like exploration, like who am I, but also what am I? Because, when you start looking at all of this, that's when you get into the spiritual stuff, because you realize when you start to go inside, the first thing you realize is you are more than your mind, and you're more than all the stories that your mind tells you, and you are more than your ego. And so then you start to say, well, like, what am I? Not just who am I, but what am I? And then that's when you start to get into, okay, like, what does my soul want? Like, what does my heart want? And then you can go even further than that, and you can say, well, then you start to realize, actually, I'm more than this body and I'm more than this mind. I'm actually consciousness.
Yeah.
We're on the whole spiritual journey of, wow, I'm magical. I'm consciousness in this conscious universe. And so that's what kind of Into the Forest is about. It's about people who are interested in just exploring, all of those topics in those middle years.
I love it, Jane. We're going to send everyone an email afterwards, all the appropriate links as well. Now, I'm going to switch up the conversation because
powerlifting, don't you?
Yeah, I want to talk about powerlifting. I want to go, okay, what was that moment you just went, I'm suffering burnout, midlife crisis, could go buy a car, could go do something. Oh, no, I'll do powerlifting.
So, again, completely random. The doctor I was working with on my chronic fatigue said, look, it's really good to lift weights. Because okay, it's really good to lift 150 kilos. He probably meant, a few sort of dumbbells.
I'm going to show some videos.
All right.
Well, let's hope all this works. All right, here we go.
That's my coach behind me.
Is it? All right. What goes through your mind at this point?
What an awesome effort that was.
On my head on that one was, fuck, this is heavy. And I'll tell you why, because that was only 143 kilos, and I can normally do 15 reps of that weight, right? And that was 2 months before I got diagnosed with cancer. And I'd been training, I'd been doing all the training, and I couldn't work out why my strength was going down and not up. And because really I'm training for 160 kilos, right?
Yes.
World record. And I couldn't work out why my weights were going down. And so on the day, I was like, I just couldn't understand why 143 kilos. I mean, I was hoping for 150, 155 on the day. And like, this is, and so my coach knows me. He knew exactly what to put on the bar. And I trust him. He chooses the weights, and I go out and lift, and I don't know what I'm lifting. And I was like, this doesn't make sense at all. I can't understand why this feels so heavy. And the form looks terrible as well. That's the other thing. And then 2 months later, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so obviously my body was just like telling me, hey, there's something wrong. We're not happy here.
But that moment where you found out that you had breast cancer, and, it would have been shit house, of course. But like, how did you battle that? And
this is where the whole kind of spiritual thing, and I hate the word spiritual, but there isn't another word, but this is where like having a spiritual practice really helps, because when you have that kind of deep knowing and that trust that all of these things in life will take you to another level. They're an opportunity to level up, you know, because all of these big things, they are they're moments where you look inside and they take you closer to love, right? That's I know that sounds kind of, that was my attitude towards it. Okay, this is an opportunity to go to another level of love for myself, and I decided that through all of it, like my spiritual practice was going to be to say yes to everything, no matter how hard it was, and to stay in love with life.
Mel Taylor's written about being lost. It sounds very frightening. How do you keep your nerve and keep progressing when you're being surrounded by all these scary things that are happening?
That's such a good question. I love it. So, and I talk about this a lot. You have to learn to love the darkness, you know. So we live in a culture that's obsessed with the light, you know. This idea you're supposed to be happy all the time, and your life is a failure if you're not happy all the time. And social media is terrible for that. When you're having a really hard time, it's the worst for your mental health, and so it really helps to have a much kind of healthier attitude to life, is to understand that life is a never-ending process of light and dark, death and renewal, and, you know, night and day. You have the seasons, and so, but as humans, we flinch from anything that feels like emotional discomfort or pain or darkness, and I think it's, you know, as you get older, it's a really good quality to develop in yourself, the ability to be comfortable at those times in your life when it feels like darkness, and it feels like, oh, you're losing everything, and it feels like everything's falling apart, and to understand that you have to sit in the darkness before you can recreate, you know, like the darkness is actually really fertile ground for creation. And so learning to sit in the darkness is a very valuable skill.